everybody, Dragon Movie Guy here. Thank you for tuning in. This is a special edition of the Dragon Movie Guy podcast, the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. They're the ones that write all of the Tonight Show sketches, all of the movies, all of the TV shows, all of your favorite comedy shows, and they are on strike. And there's actually a lot more going on than just a simple strike, but at least talk about some of the basics that are at stake with this writer's strike that is going on. A friend of the channel who knows a thing or two about working behind the scenes. He actually has his own IMDb page. He is a friend of the channel. He is a noted person who is interested in labor and politics and all of those things. So please welcome to Dragon Movie Guy, Rob Kristjansson. Welcome, Rob, to the channel to talk about the WGA strike.
Well, as a noted man.
I noted you, so therefore you are noted.
Absolutely right. And thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, DMG, and for bringing me on the show. I certainly have been following this strike and labor stuff around the industry that you and I both cover from our both our unique angles, and so I'm excited, not happy, but excited to talk about this stuff with you. Because this strike covers a number of issues that I think affect a lot more people than you would initially think.
This will affect what comes into people's homes and in theaters if it doesn't get solved pretty quickly. This is one of those things that could affect movies going into theaters, shows that are available for streaming, even something as simple as watching The Tonight Show. These are things that can be affected, and in some cases, like The Tonight Show, The Late Late Show, The Late Show, all of these shows have already gone off the air because of this writer's strike, so it does affect people. Even if Hollywood arguing with itself isn't enough of public theater there, it does affect entertainment coming into people's homes as well. Just kind of starting off with some of the basics and the fact that the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, they've been negotiating for a while. This is one of those things where the writers have gone on strike several times throughout their history. I remember when I was a kid in 1987 watching the news about a really protracted strike that prevented Late Night with David Letterman from going on the air, and it was a big thing even back then. There was another writer's strike in 2007, and they narrowly avoided a strike in 2020 because of the pandemic going on. So I think a lot of this that's going on right now is kind of pent-up stuff, like, well, you can't go on strike right now, it's the pandemic. So of those...
the pressure's been building.
Talks broke down a week ago. I think everyone in Hollywood kind of knew this was coming because the Late Late Show with James Corden, which is my favorite late night show of the last couple of years, the Late Late Show ended its run. They announced that it was going to be ending in 2023 anyway, but when they said that it was going to be ending a little bit early at the end of April, I kind of started going, well, why would they end in April? Why wouldn't they end with May sweeps? And then you find out, oh, well, the show's going off the air entirely. No one's replacing him. And then all of a sudden the news of the potential writer's strikes.
You end up doing the math and you go, there we go. That's
yeah. So they don't want to end the show on strike. So they ended in April. And there are a lot of interesting issues to talk about. And part of that is now studios are starting to shut down. And as a result, these picket lines are forming, and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers.
Call them the producers.
Yeah, the producers, the
AMPTP.
Yeah, that's a big acronym. It's the AMPTP.
David Letterman has a great description for the producers.
Cowards, cutthroats, and weasels.
I may not be here for a while. You!
Wait a minute.
You! And you!
Aren't you forgetting something? I love you.
This message has been brought to you by the Writers Guild of America.
Sums it up as cowards, cutthroats, and weasels. That was during the precipice of the last strike, the last big one, where he ended up actually signing a side deal as a producer because he is a writer, but was the owner of
Worldwide Pants.
that show. He was the producer, he was the owner, and so he signed a deal. He was one of the first to sign a deal with the Writers Guild. And you look at Letterman's history, there is an owner who remembered that he was a worker once. And all his behavior since back in the NBC days, you look at worker-friendly choices he made, but remembered that he was once a worker and behaved accordingly. And so, cutthroats, cowards, and weasel.
This is a weird business where, yes, there are unions, there are guilds, but a lot of times people are playing multiple roles at the same time. Even when we had the accident on Alec Baldwin's set, he was the star of the film, but he was also a producer on the film. So a lot of times you get people wearing multiple hats in this business in shows and writing rooms. You have people that are producers on shows who are also heads of writing staff.
I think we can get caught up too much in those labels. Alec Baldwin, briefly, he was a producer. He got handed that title as part of his deal because he was one of the people that helped the real producers of the show make the movie happen. But in no way did he have set power. He wasn't saying, oh, you're going to hire that person as the production manager. You're going to have... He wasn't a real producer. He was somebody who, because he was attached, the movie got made. Oh, you got a star. And his agent's like, yeah, he's identified as a producer. That said, you do have, and a handful of showrunners who are both, in a way, they're kind of like the lead hand. They are both running the whole production, making decisions across the board, and also are the creative impetus. They are the head writer. They don't just run the writing room, they run the production. And those folks are in a bit of a bind.
And even if it was one of those things where the scripts were already written, well, can we just shoot everything? Well, sure, you can shoot what was written, but if you're abiding by a strike and not writing things during a strike, then you could theoretically only shoot what was on the page. That was one of the interesting things that I was reading. There's
that A through H exclusions, but the Writers Guild is saying, no, that's all struck work. Those showrunners are in a bit of a bind. First of all, do they cross the picket line at all? Because they are writers. They are guild members in good standing, dues-paying guild members, but also their employer, HBO, Disney, they're all saying, we expect you to show up for work. And if you don't, you could be held in breach of contract. We also reserve the right to not pay you. Well, kind of like the writers that aren't working. I think less a threat than you're in breach of contract and we might sue you.
Absolutely. So all of that starts, all of those legalese start coming into effect. And people gets you get stuck on both sides of the line in that case because you want to support your friends in the writers' room, but you also don't want to have to deal with litigation.
And don't become a showrunner if you can't. You know what? You want to be a boss? Guess what? These are the tough calls that bosses have to make. You know what? And I don't have much sympathy for the showrunners who are going. And again, Letterman had a great bit at the beginning of this piece where he goes, got to worry about the writers.
I've been a member of that guild for all my life. And on the other hand,
all the other people who depend on the show and
the welfare of the staff and the crew who work here at the Late Show. And yours truly, once again, caught right in the middle.
I'm the victim here.
Right in the middle, ladies and gentlemen.
And no matter what I do, I'm the hero.
If this strike turns out to hurt anyone, it'll be yours truly. I'm the one who gets hurt here. Do you understand?
And of course, he's being a smart ASS.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad we agree on that.
No, you're not the problem. You're still getting paid. You're okay. That strikes do have a significant impact on the folks immediately, but there's a reason they went on strike.
So we've been getting some strike lines forming in New York, strikes forming in LA, and also in Atlanta, which has become a major production hub in the last several years. Like think all of your favorite Marvel movies now, a lot of them are shot in Atlanta. And I took this clip from Variety. This is talking about how Disney has sent letters out to people. And even in this article, trying to explain the legalese of what they're talking with all the labor stuff, they're talking about suspending deals with people with people whose deals haven't been suspended because they're trying to suspend their deals. I think I'm getting that right.
Yeah.
So Netflix,
you know what?
Netflix and Paramount are also doing similar things where, again, people are kind of getting caught on both sides of the line here, and the studios are
okay, remember, a handful of people are getting caught on both sides of the line.
Yeah.
Really, a handful. Like some showrunners. I think it's really important to understand that it's a minor, like a really small chunk of showrunners who are actually truly on both sides of the line. The rest are clearly demarcated. And I think it's important to note that even the ones who are, let's say, crew, IA, like IATSE, IA, International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, most of the crew, or the Teamsters doing most of the transportation. Those folks are, when that picket line shows up, they don't cross the line. Why? Because of solidarity. They're making that choice because they're like, you know what these guys are fighting over is going to affect me.
And
writers supported as we were ramping up for a strike.
The Writers Guild of America is roughly 11,000 writers involved in this strike. Interestingly, though, the Directors Guild of America, the WGA, their deal starts negotiating next week, and the SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, their deal comes up next month.
Oh yeah.
So this is
first time it's happened in maybe ever.
Yeah,
this like an industry-wide strike or lockout.
The potential triple Yahtzee of work stoppages, for sure. And obviously, all of these things are affected by streaming. All of these things are affected by the pandemic and everything that was shut down for a while. But this is something. These issues are ones that have been coming for a very long time. The proliferation of reality TV, starting 20 years ago, was all about trying to not pay the writers. That was the whole reason. Why do you put on American Idol? Why do you put on all of these competition shows? Survivor. Well, you do it because you don't have to pay writers.
Cheap television.
Yes, it's cheap.
It's cheap, dramatic television. Although I think some of it, one of the other reasons you have uptick in that was as much about the broadcast networks getting pressure at the time from cable. Streaming was barely anything. Cable and this idea, it's like we need something live for people to tune in, something that, we got to sit down and watch this. You can only put on so much sports.
If you look back at the 50s, the country is a lot smaller than it is now, but you only had 3 channels, so ratings and viewership were a lot higher. By the time you get to the 80s and cable TV comes along and you have, say, 30 channels, even though the country's gotten a lot bigger, ratings were starting to go down. And now
DVD.
Yeah, and beyond
gaming.
And 30 years beyond that, now we have streaming. You have hundreds of TV channels, and you don't even have to watch live. It's all streaming. So now, even though the country is much bigger than it was 50 or 60 years ago, the size of the pie has gotten bigger, but you're doing hundreds and hundreds of slices. So trying to get viewership, that isn't just management complaining about low viewership.
No,
that actually is a thing.
Management doing a double fake.
Yeah.
The industry as a whole is making billions upon billions, DMG. What has happened though is that they're making it over 1 million different profit lines, 1 million different little slices, and every time they plead poverty, this one's poor and this one's poor and this one's poor. How come you keep making more money? They are overwhelmed with though. No one's buying and gobbling up and consolidating because they're like, we need more losers to bring into. No, people don't invest and constantly invest in Netflix because they think, well, this is a way to burn my money. There's a ton of money being made. It's just that the big producers, the big money, has figured out a way to slice it all up and say, oh, well, it's actually this, and what about that, and what about this, and moving things around. It's like a ridiculous game of three-card Monte, except there are workers' lives at stake, their livelihoods. And I think that's really what the strike is over. It's about their ability to earn a decent living. And all these issues can be drilled down to that. You know, they struck over reality television because they said non-scripted ain't non-scripted. It is scripted. It is properly, it's drawn. They tell stories with it. These folks just don't make a union wage. And so, of course, they're more desperate, more, I liken it to, like most gig workers, like myself, forever the sword of Damocles over your head, you know? Anyway, not that I have a strong opinion on the subject.
Let's talk about some of the issues. Part of those is the size of writers' rooms. And when we say the WGA...
The main rooms and minimum staffing, yeah.
Well, and part of that is, you know, it is the WGA. It is the Writers Guild. This is a guild in the same way that you would have a unionized group of electricians or plumbers. It's a different kind of work, but it is still organized labor. It is still people banding together to try and collectively bargain out deals. It's just these are writers, so they use their pens and their keyboards as opposed to being a plumber or electrician. So the size of writers' rooms, all of these things are very highly negotiated, bargained for, fought over, and with the proliferation of streaming, now you're seeing smaller episode counts because writers are paid by numbers of episodes. So you're seeing smaller episode counts, smaller writers' rooms, and even some limited series that are being written by one person.
Allegedly.
Well, like for example, think James Gunn writing Peacemaker. 8 episodes, he's listed as the writer on all 8 episodes in that series. So there's not as many young writers coming up through the guild. Like anything else, if you're a young plumber, you got to learn how to be a plumber coming up. You don't start as a master craftsman.
Oh yeah.
You come up and, you know, you're 23, 24 years old. You have to have a training ground for being a writer to eventually become a head writer and take over, be a showrunner. So the fact that these rooms are getting smaller and smaller, and the numbers of writers.
YouTube model,
where
you get your training however the hell you get your training, and we'll all just pick the best of a whole bunch of mediocrity. There are many effects here, and I think the mini rooms and the minimum staffing levels are probably the most straightforward negotiable ones. It's just the employer, represented by the AMPTP, cowards, cutthroats, and weasels. They are just refusing to negotiate it on it at all, you know. But where it affects you and I is it's like, yeah, there's no development. The industry, the producers said, you know, not our problem. We'll figure out how to get quality work later, you know, which should bother you and I as, let's say, fans, appreciators of the art form, because that means there's just a lot more catch can. Maybe the person's good, maybe they aren't. And I'm not saying that formal training is everything, but apprenticeship works, especially in something that is incredibly hard as writing down a television or a film story.
Some of the writers have been pointing out that as they were coming up and were young writers on sitcoms, TV shows, even something as simple as Nickelodeon, you have these writers' rooms and you learn how to write, but you also go to the set.
Basics of your craft.
Yeah, you go to the set, you meet the people there, you try and figure out what their voices are and have that go into your writing of the program. But when you have shorter writing windows, fewer people in the room, and there isn't funding there to send the writers to the set, then all of a sudden the quality of the writing across the board goes down.
The quality of the work is affected. Like 4 or 5 little writing rooms. Only one of those writing rooms might be successful enough to write a show that gets picked up where they actually make real money. Everyone else, they got paid development fees for all intents and purposes. They may make next to nothing, and that is the studios, the producers saying, you know what, we're going to put our risk 80% of these people are going to share our risk. Even the ones who win have to work themselves to death, but still are only paid per episode. It's one of those things where the producers are using an old model of payment for a new model of production. And with the WGA's demands in this area, minimum staffing levels, changing the way mini rooms and development work is paid, it's really just trying to say, hey, we could make a living before when production was like that, and so we're paid like that. We need the pay to match the new mode of production so that we can still actually make a living, that we can still make enough. We didn't make a successful show. We're not, oh, okay, I got to go back to waiting tables or I'm just out of the industry overnight.
But it's also getting paid for re-airing reruns. And when you have streaming...
The residuals area, yeah.
There aren't the residuals there because it's all just streaming. He doesn't have an air date. The
residuals are there. The money is there. What it is that the producers don't want to pay. They don't want to give up. Because what does the WGA want? They want to say, here, let's, like every other aspect of what we do, we have a third party, the Nielsen ratings in television, which was considered that trusted third party that could give us, hey, this is what the thing's actually doing. Or in film, we had those box office figures that, again, a number of people depended on. You could audit the information, and the WGA had access, and so did a lot of other people. The streamers, like, yeah, we're not letting you in that. You just have to accept what we pay you, and successful or not, who knows?
When Netflix comes out and says the number one show or movie that we had on Netflix this week is... you get some really convoluted numbers coming out as to what is number one, what's number two, what's number three, and why is it number one, number two, number three. And I get it. It's still a new...
number one getting 90% of the views and then 2 through 10 splitting up the rest? Like, what does that graph look like? Is it like this or is it more like that? Is it...
You know, in some ways I get it because we're in a different world now. We're in a streaming world where a lot of times if someone pushes play, it's not like when you sit down and watch TV and you just sort of watch the whole program. People start and stop and watch half of it, then they come back 3 days later.
Yeah, but who cares? The streamers have that data. They don't want to share it because then they'd actually have to pay.
But that's the point, though.
That's what it all comes down to, is the producers don't want to pay. They're like, no, we're happy with the way it is.
And
anytime the new thing lets us pay you less, we're going to stick with that. And this is another area, and this is what's, I think, frustrating, and what everyone should know is that there's some of these areas where they flat refuse to negotiate on. They won't negotiate. There's they have no response on residuals other than no. They have no response on the writers' rooms. It's rich people porn.
Oh,
White Lotus.
that's the one way of describing
that's a single writer. Well, if you dig a little deeper on how writing credits are given out on television shows and how some of this stuff works, maybe that writer did all that, but there's plenty of even old model writers where they're like, they always had 4 assistants. Did you really? Because 8 hours of television, just you, just out of your head, no rewrites, no, hey, can you take another pass? Or, hey, can you bundle this together and then I'll give my imprimatur? I find it a little hard to believe. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I do find it hard to believe. James Gunn, he's got nothing else going on in his life. He can just, nope, I'm in the room now. Don't interrupt me with any of the other crap I'm doing. Edit room, promotions. Oh, I'm taking over the DCEU. But yes, I did all of that on my own. Not buying that.
And even
incredibly difficult to believe.
And it is interesting too that the WGA has been pushing back on their own members that are doing that. The James Gunns of the world, Mike White, who did the White Lotus, they've been getting pushed back on by their own guild and saying, look, we need this. This is a potential problem spot for the other members of the Writers Guild, and you may look at it as creative control. but this has much bigger impacts than just saying, well, I wrote the entire
never had
series.
creative control anyway. They always did. They're the boss. It's like, I don't like that. I like that.
Joe Russo of the Russo brothers that were the directors of Avengers Endgame, amongst
Going
many
back to
other.
Community.
Yes, going all the way
Writer
back
and
to the
directors.
Community.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he's been talking about in relation to this Writers Guild strike is the potential of AI, of artificial intelligence, which kind of popped up towards the end of last year, ChatGPT, amongst many other things. And if you look into what a lot of the writers on the picket line have been talking about, they've been bringing up, well, we don't, this is an item we want to negotiate. We don't want AI writing scripts for us. The alleged response from management, but I kind of believe it in this case where they say, well, we'll talk about it. We'll commit to a meeting to talk.
Yeah.
We're not going to commit to not
directly. Well,
we're not going to commit to not using.
It's a complicated issue.
Yeah.
The producers offered meetings instead of an actual negotiation position. One of their demands is that you buy a feature script. After a set number of edits, rewrites, revisions, that they get paid again. And either that's built into the first contract and it's always a multiple or a percentage of the base rate, that it's formalized. Because what has been happening, and I know this as a voiceover guy, I totally got this. I got that completely. What these producers would do is they'd buy a script from somebody, especially a first timer, because any of the big names, they're like, yeah, you want me to touch my keyboard again? That's going to cost you X, and that's negotiated because they're hiring a big name, a dependable big name. But a newcomer, first time they sold, or they've only sold a couple of scripts, they're like, can you take another look at this? Can you punch that up? Can you do this? Can you do this? All of a sudden, you're 6 months down of constantly reworking your script. No extra money. They were proposing a system so that these people get paid for that. Maybe it's built into the first thing. And wait, the employer here, as a group said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. But you know what? We will educate our executives on how hard these people work. To these workers. That's basically it. Now we ain't changing. Not. Oh, I am getting better coordinating those swears with my button. They don't want to change anything. And educate, that means nothing. Go over to AI. It's a complicated issue. We really we'll have some meetings and education, and it's like
anybody who's on Fiverr or Upwork or any sort of gig economy, if you start looking at the job postings, will say, this is my fee, and included is...
They're called revisions.
Yeah, a couple of revisions. But it doesn't come with unlimited revisions for this one fee. We're not going to sit there and keep reworking it for the next 6 months just to get it to some impossible level of expectations of performance. We will say, this is our work. We stand by our work. We'll do a revision or two or whatever the job offer is. But there are limits to that, and this is the Writers Guild version of that.
Yeah.
Is saying,
I want to say, as a gig worker, as a Fiverr voiceover guy, what actually it is revisions, i.e. changes to the script. Like, hey, we changed the voiceover script. And I limit it. I say, okay, up to this number of words, you get it. You want to change the script even more. But what happens is it's, well, we don't like that performance. And it's just a constant, well, it's got to be more this. I want more authoritative. It's like, but you said conversational. It's like, and you can get buried in this stuff. Never mind, we changed the words, we need you to re-say it.
When I was at CinemaCon a week or two ago, Sony was showing a clip from the new Spider-Man animated film. In amongst the scene that they were showing was an emotional scene. And what was interesting was say 65 to 75% of the scene was completely done. Like, it was, you could tell it was finished, ready to deliver graphics. But
They're still working on it.
But there were little clips that were cut out that was the working CGI in there, where you could tell that they changed the script. And it was interesting seeing the visual representation of that, even though the audio, anyone's ears couldn't pick up the difference in performance. But then when you see the rough cut placeholder CGI mixed in with the finished conversation, the finished scene, it was really interesting getting a behind the scenes look at that revision process of, they're still working on and having their voice actors revisit, revoice their parts.
Netflix tries to insert in a voiceover performer's, a voice actor's contract that we can simulate your voice in perpetuity, anywhere, everywhere, for whatever purpose we want. Work for them once, and you're done. So, of course, and it's just such a finky thing. Apparently, it didn't play out the way they wanted it to, but you see their intent in even trying it. If Netflix gets its way on this, they're not going to use it. Your example ties into this perfectly. They're not going to use it to replace that actor in whole new roles, because they can't. You need a human being to interpret what's on the page, to deliver a tale. Everyone at every level is a storyteller. What they will use it for, they're going to use it to minor changed, or we didn't quite hear that. We don't have to bring the actor anymore because we modified the scene such that we changed the character's name. So every time it says Bill, it says, and that's how they're going to use it. To cut down on the time, they'd have to bring that vocal performer in, pay for their ADR time. There won't be any more or anywhere near as many pickups. And this all comes down to cutting these costs on these people who need this goddamn income so that you and I, can enjoy and comment on great performances, and it's like, this is why we, even as just mere viewers, should be with these workers.
CNN ran a story a couple of months ago. If you have, say, 3 or 4 minutes of audio, and they took Anderson Cooper, who's one of the big anchors on CNN, they took a audio recording of Anderson Cooper, uploaded it to this AI voiceover site.
Descript has one. There's a number of them,
And within a couple of minutes, they could type in anything into that program. It didn't sound like Anderson Cooper exactly. It sounded like a robot version of Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
But the fact that this is, the baseline consumer level thing of what's available now, where is this going to be 5 years from now, and how do you protect?
I'm not worried about 5 years from now, and I'll tell you why. Automated driving. Billions. Exactly. Billions. 2 pinkies for that one. Driving is relatively simple. We still don't have it. We're never going to get it. And that's just driving. And I really do mean that's just driving. The basics of driving are easy. AI stuff on stuff that's incredibly difficult that we've never actually been able to will at best give you 70-80% of the bridge. You still need the other part of the bridge.
You know what this does sound like, though? It does sound like a Dr. Evil plan from one of the Austin Powers movies. I will create a giant artificial intelligence driving service that will put the working man out of work. Like it sounds like a Dr. Evil plan.
That will be so bad that everyone will die because these things are dangerous. Because
that's why it's Dr. Evil.
They're not even putting anybody out of jail. They have not. Full Safe Drive has put no one out of work. If somebody offered me as a voiceover artist saying, "Hey Rob, give us $2,000, we'll build you a plugin. It'll sound like your voice. This is how you operate it. And then I could use it for long form content, which otherwise I just don't do. And then I can insert myself where required, but it's my voice, owned by me, my thing, my creative storytelling abilities." I'd be down with that. Make my life easier. Some writer, I don't resent a writer saying, you know what, a fair chunk of my work is boilerplate. I can use this AI to put together the elements, get the building blocks together. But I, the professional, well-trained, creative person, knows how to knit it all together. And that's the part I enjoy anyway. That's the good part. That's the fun part. That's the actual value that I add. We have AI, we've got robots, but because we could only think of it as a way for an employer to cut costs, I have to work harder for less and be more afraid about my security. And that's nuts. We live in a world, DMG, where we've got robots and AI. The only thing I should be worried about is what I'm going to do with all the stuff the robots are making me in the leisure time I have because of AI.
Deadline has an article out. George R.R. Martin, he has shut down his writer's room for this new Game of Thrones sequel. Mini rooms, not having many writers around, as an abomination. As a young writer growing up, cut his teeth a little bit in writing rooms in the 80s. Any business can survive on inertia to a certain extent for a little while. But if you take away the human element and the learning factor and teaching the next generation of people those skills, those practical skills of learning in the actual environment, seeing how the sausage is made, it's a recipe for disaster for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road.
A machine chunked it out. There's a reason why there's no let's appreciate IKEA manufactured crap. Unless it's somebody who says, look what cool things I did with my IKEA junk. Then all of a sudden we're interested. Because it's still about the human experience, about being amazed by a great performance that a human being did. The soul is such a necessary part of the art. We need that connection.
The 60 Minutes piece, it was at Google, it was their proprietary cutting-edge AI. They took this 6-word short story from Hemingway, and the AI was able to extrapolate and write a short story in iambic pentameter. Now do it in Spanish. For sale, baby shoes, never worn.
Yeah, which is genius. That is the core genius. Not the thing going, well, now I'll copy pasta, and that's all these engines are doing. ChatGPT, you've got to be smart in how to ask it. So you're taking a great writer, a genius writer, and using that as the core. And it ends up with something decent because you started from brilliance. And then iambic pentameter, it's like, well, it can do rules. That's the thing. All these things can do rules. That's not how creativity really works. That is not the soul in the machine.
The machine will do what you tell the machine to do, even if it's not what you intended to tell the machine to do. The machine is not the problem. It's the person inputting the data into the machine.
The operator.
Operator error.
Unless you're an owner, and even an owner, get your head out of your you-know-what. But everyone else should be with these writers because they are on the front lines of this latest push. Whether you're sympathize with them as other workers or you just want decent content that when you turn something on that you go, wow, this is actually reasonably well made. You may not like it or you may love it, because of your own personal taste, but that it is reasonably well made by people who are reasonably well compensated is in all our interests. Got a lot less interested in editorializing of what Chatbot 3000 said. Like, I don't care. I can't even get mad. It's Chatbot 3000. It's a machine.
Well,
like, I don't get mad at it. I don't editorialize on the creative output of a hammer. And I don't care. I don't get mad that the hammer was the thing that hit somebody in the head.
When you and I are doing a video on the best summer movies from 2023, and we're looking back 2 months from now, you could probably put all that into a chat GPT and say, what were the best the Chatbot 3000, what were the best movies from summer 2023? And it'll come out with some sort of a randomized list.
Up with a list.
Yeah, but does it have the same opinion? Does it have the same reasoning? Does it have the same illogic in some ways? The emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
With that, I think we should wrap this up. More conversations about the writer's strike, I'm sure, to be had in the future.
Seeing how long it goes. WGA is saying X, and the employers are just no.
And look,
that's
this is one of those
pretty
things
far apart.
people forget now, but whole TV series were canceled based off of the writers' strike from 2007.
Movies that did come out that were in midst of production ended up being really. Quantum of Solace is a great example.
Transformers 2.
Film. Exactly, yeah. Say what you will, Michael Bay definitely has creative skills, but a writer he ain't.
Because of the writers' strike, we got Transformers balls dangling over the Great Pyramids of Giza. As a result of trying to push forward through a writer's strike. So with that incredibly disturbing robot AI vision of Transformers testicles dangling over the pyramids of Giza. Let's wrap this up for today. Rob Kristjansson, thank you for coming on, talking AI robot balls and everything along there.
I'm not unionized, but when union wages go up, all boats rise. And so I think it's really important, and working conditions, all those things benefit me, will benefit me as a voiceover professional. And so, yeah, I think it's really important what they're doing here.
What are you working on? What do you have coming up
you know what? I'm
your
really
channel?
Excited. Jim and I recently saw Guardians of the Galaxy. I went and saw it again. Now, we did do our full spoiler zone take on it, and right now I'm just doing up the using AI Descript to generate with my input the subtitles for, but I'm actually cutting up chunks of it because I think we talked about in the spoiler zone, and that'll be, there'll be plenty of warnings on this film that I have a very strong opinion about, and I strongly recommend get to the theater, DMG, if you haven't already. Get to the theater. And for anyone out there watching your show, and they should be watching your show, get to the theater, watch it. I'm looking forward to your take on it, Brian.
And my take will not in any way be affected by AI. Although I do love that you're after spending the last half hour talking about the evils of AI, you're using AI yourself.
Well, again, as a tool to make my life easier, a worker, absolutely. AI has a place. I am not against AI.
And to be completely transparent, when I go and do my shorts reviews after going to see a movie, how I get my closed captioning on there is from the closed captioning CAPTCHA. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's one that's it's built into Instagram, and you can it automatically listens to it, and it's 85-90% correct. You have to tweak and fix it here and there,
it's
but
not the whole bridge.
It's not the whole bridge, but it does do a lot of the heavy lifting and lets you get things done. And honestly, it lets me. I shoot roughly between 5 and 10 vertical video shorts videos after seeing a movie. It lets me process through all of those in a third of the time.
Yeah.
By adding the closed captioning to it. So
you
it
may
definitely
otherwise you might limit your content, or you're limiting accessibility to your content. This week we're going to be looking at an oldie, not one of the new movies that is coming out, but one that's been on Netflix for a while, The Outpost. Which is based on the book by Jake Tapper.
Jake Tapper, that's it, yes.
The Outpost, An Untold Story of American Valor by Jake Tapper. And of course, Jim and I will once again be asking that question I am fascinated by. Is there such a thing as a good war film? And good in a moralistic sense, not in a... Yeah, there's some great flicks here. We're going to be watching a few of them over the course of the next several months and kind of digging deeper into that more, let's say, metaphysical question or moral question.
Always a good debate and question to be asking for sure.
Again, DMG, got to have you back on our show sooner rather than later. Maybe after you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3. have a little
Yes.
little post.
Get off my couch and
about it.
get off my
Yes.
gosh darn couch and get to the theater and watch.
Get to the theater.
Watch the movie that was number 3 on my May.
You know what?
My
Here's the
must
thing
watch
we
list.
need to discuss after you've seen this. Not theater over home, but what kind of films do you need to see in the theater, and what kind of films can you see at home, and why? That is the question you and I are going to talk about on my channel. But first, you have to go see Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm saying in the theater, and I'll tell you why when we do that collab.
Okay.
That collab.
Absolutely. Rob Kristjansson, thank you for coming on Dragon Movie Guy.